Joining us now as the call for by foreign missions for a review of the Cybercrime Act to prevent abuse continues to grow. Now, Jerry Aondo, a senior advocate of Nigeria, Aondo. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsnight. Yeah, well, in spite of the fact that the Cybercrime Act was amended in 2024, there are still concerns that the law, actually is being increasingly misused. 29 journalists so far, have been charged under this act. Your thoughts on, what these foreign envoys are calling for? There's a need for a review of the Cybercrime Act.
Yes, you see, with the coming of internet has revolutionized communication and has made things in such a way that there are various bloggers, there are various media houses, there are various internet kind of outfits that pass and disseminate information. And they call by various groups and countries towards this international convention for the Cybercrime Act to be looked at. I think it's a call to be looked into. I agree with them totally. But however, for any law or legislation to come into being, it all depends on what's at stake. For instance, now, if you see the rate at which Nigeria is moving, we are one of the most famous countries that are moving with regards to dissemination of information on internet, call it Facebook or whatever media house. We are way ahead, even ahead of the United States of America. And there are times you see some information through AI or whatsoever, and it drives you so fast to understand that, look, these things are happening for real. When you put in your investigation to investigation journalism or whatsoever, you now discover that, look, these informations are just information to create maybe chaos or to create pain or fear in the midst. And that's what brought about the Cybercrime Prohibition Act. And you cannot live in a state of nature without the law trying to confer the people or the citizens or make them understand they should be subject to the law, because the law is what guides us as citizens in our doings and all that we do. Now, a lot of people have drawn criticism with regards to that, like the other countries. I was thinking maybe I'll see the United States of America as part of it, but that notwithstanding, talking about freedom of information, talking about freedom of speech, under Section 39, which defines your ability to express freely what you feel is right and what you feel within the right thinking mind that is okay. Subsequently, went down to 2, talks about the freedom of the press, to set up press houses and all that, the press and all that. Now, you cannot do away with that section without looking at Section 1 sub 3 of the 1999 Constitution. Because to me, to an extent, the problem when I looked at the Cybercrime Act, it is the wordings. They are not so expressed to an extent.
So
they are not so expressed. They are a little bit vague.
That's where the challenge.
That's where the challenge comes.
Great. Okay. So
even with its amendments.
Yes. If I understand you, on the one hand, you say you agree with the foreign missions.
Yes.
But you've also struck a balance saying that there's a need for the Cybercrime Act.
Absolutely.
Because the government is arguing that the Act protects citizens from online fraud, blackmail, and cyber attacks. So then the question then is, what specific amendments, beyond the language which you've highlighted, what specific amendments do you recommend to ensure that we have a genuine Cybercrime Act?
Well, the only amendment I want to do is legislation. The National Assembly, the draftsman. If a draftman is express in his wording and amends a particular provisions of the law which he feels is not comfortable, and make it clear for every common man in clear language, express literal language, so that everybody understands this is what it says.
But are there examples you can cite for us?
No, for example, if you look at, let's start with Section 1 sub 3. Let's go by that format. Section 1 sub 3 says any law that is in contravention with the Constitution is null and void.
Right.
Now, you're talking about the Cybercrime Act, which states insults. You understand? Publication, text messages that are bound maybe to insult or put someone in a state of disrepute. That person can be prosecuted. That person can be held liable. That person will be held to pay 7 million naira for violating that law, or 3 years imprisonment.
For insulting somebody?
Yes, or text message or whatsoever. To me, I feel that law to an extent is quite draconian, because the definition of that must be expressed. XYZ, this is what the law states. this other provision, this is what the law states. And it's express and clear. We talk about freedom of information, freedom of expression. From what other countries are crying about, our Cybercrime Act is to the aspect of your freedom to express what you think is right. It shouldn't be coerced. It shouldn't be stringent. It shouldn't be draconian. So to me, for the draftsman, I'll say, try and amend these laws. We already have this legislation. Amend it in such a way that it will be clear in its clarity.
Yeah, but the original purpose of the Cybercrimes Act was to address fraud and cyber terrorism. But like it's been stated, it's been abused.
Sure.
So how more clearly can you make that particular law be in a way that it is not in any way ambiguous or stands contrary to the ground norm, which is the Constitution?
Well, in order to make that so clear is to see how they can sit down and look at the provisions which they feel that, look, this violates the rights of the nation, violates the rights of the state, violates the right of the citizens.
Apart from that point that you raised in terms of which aspects need to be reviewed,
Yes.
what other aspects really need to be looked at?
Well, the other aspect that I think,
the
aspect that I think the cybercrime law should be looked, the Cybercrime Act should be looked at, should be clear. If you talk about someone disseminating information through text messages that you know that is insulting, trying to create maybe tension or national security, it should be clearly stated. And the provisions of 7 million naira, 2 years imprisonment, to me, I think is quite ridiculous.
Okay, so the language and perhaps the penalty.
The penalty is quite ridiculous.
What's your take?
Because if you look at the penalty and the language, look at other provisions of other laws. Even the penalty is not up to that amount.
Great, it's not that punitive. Okay, but what's your take on those who say this joint statement by the foreign missions is unnecessary interference? They say there should be a line between diplomacy and incursion, and perhaps these foreign missions have crossed that line from diplomacy to incursion.
Well, Nigeria is a sovereign state, and Nigeria is a state that is independent, devoid of any interference, and should not be guided by whatsoever interference from other nations. Our situation here is peculiar. It's different from theirs. The way things are being abused here is quite different. The way internets are being abused, text messages, call it WhatsApp, call it Facebook, the way it's being abused is quite different the way it's tenable in other states. And to me, we can manage our situation even without them per se, but let the laws be friendly to accommodate every citizen of this country. The laws shouldn't be so stringent in such a manner that it will become difficult for you and I to operate, because these laws are meant for man. These laws are not meant for the states. These laws are not meant for the high and mighty. These laws are meant to guide our precepts as human beings to live our daily life and operate. So where a law is contrary to a particular provisions of the same constitution, then it becomes void.
I guess it's a tough one, trying to draw a line between the Constitution, which is the ground norm, and other acts or laws like this, cyber stalking. But how do you ensure that a law that is, well intended, is not abused, especially the Cyber Crimes Act? How do you ensure that it's not abused?
Well, the only way you can ensure is to see how you follow its applicability in line with judicial interpretations. The judiciary have done a lot with regards to how freedom of expression, freedom of speech, how things like Cybercrime Act should be applicable. So for you to see that it's being enforced, in as much as you're trying to make it clear for everyone, follow the judicial interpretation. The law enforcement agency should see what the court states with respect to this. Not just because you see people are being arrested at times, they say you are being arrested for cybercrime whatsoever. And you see the punitive measure being applied is quite different from what the law states.
Okay. Yeah. It's a fine place to leave it. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective. Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Jerry Aondo. I hope I got that right. Thank you for being on the news.